Imagine a huge, high-stakes chess match, but playing out on the global stage. Every single move, even a small one, it can send these unexpected ripples right across continents. It can completely shift the board.
Yeah, and lately we've definitely seen some fascinating moves. They've brought one particularly intricate dynamic into really sharp focus.
Hmm. We're talking about that endlessly complex, sometimes just baffling triangular relationship, the one between the United States, India, and Pakistan.
It really is. It's like a dance, isn't it? Rooted in these deep historical currents shaped by strategic calculations, and it's always being recalibrated by whatever's happening right now.
Right. And for this deep dive, our mission is basically to cut through all that noise. We want to pull out the crucial bits of insight from this whole dynamic, help you understand what's truly important about this critical region, and, why it shifts matter to everyone, really.
Exactly. Because one single event, something truly unexpected, it recently just thrust this entire thing into, well, glaring clarity.
You're talking about the U.S. President, Donald Trump's lunch, with Pakistan's Army Chief, Field Marshal Munir.
That's the one. At the White House back on June 18th, 2025.
June 18th, 2025. Yeah, that date.
Uh-huh.
It feels like it'll probably be one for the history books. I mean, such a direct military-to-military thing between a U.S. president and a foreign army chief,
Uh-huh.
completely bypassing that country's civilian leadership. It's not just unusual, it feels like it fundamentally redefines diplomatic norms there.
It really does. It felt like Washington was sending a very, very specific message.
Okay, so if this lunch was the dramatic spark, what exactly made it so, well, unprecedented, and what kind of ripple effects did it kick off immediately?
Well, like you said, the White House on June 18th, 2025, it was the scene of something unique. A U.S. president hosting a foreign army chief, but with absolutely no civilian government officials from Pakistan alongside him.
None at all.
It's just, well, it's unprecedented. This wasn't some general popping by for a routine visit. This was a high-level presidential meeting. It was an explicit elevation, really, of Pakistan's military influence right there on the world stage.
And then what happened right after was maybe even more telling. I mean, the thing that really grabbed headlines was Donald Trump's claim, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely. Highly controversial.
Saying he personally stopped a recent conflict between India and Pakistan. That's a huge assertion for any leader to make.
Especially about two nuclear-armed states, yeah. Very bold claim.
So how did India react?
Well, the reaction from New Delhi was swift.
Yeah.
And unequivocal. India firmly, almost instantly denied Trump's claim.
Just flat out denied it.
Flat out. India's defense secretary, Rajesh Kumar Singh, he called the claim surprising, stated very clearly that no mediation was needed. It immediately highlighted the totally different narratives going on.
And it underscores India's long-standing policy, right?
Mm.
They don't want third-party mediation in their issues with Pakistan.
Exactly. They've been consistent on that for decades. So you had this weird situation, a U.S. president claiming he mediated, and one of the countries involved just saying, nope, didn't happen, wasn't needed.
So, okay, despite these completely conflicting stories, what did the meeting itself signal for U.S.-Pakistan ties? What was the underlying message there?
Well, at a basic level, it signaled a clear warming of U.S.-Pakistan relations, or, perhaps more accurately, a significant recalibration.
A shift.
A definite shift. Many analysts quickly tied this move to the current tensions brewing in the Middle East, specifically involving Iran and Israel.
Ah, the strategic location aspect.
Precisely. Pakistan's location, sharing that long border with Iran, its historical ties in the region. It makes Pakistan an incredibly valuable partner for Washington, especially if the U.S. is looking to, say, bolster regional stability or even explore alternative energy routes or something.
So some saw it as a very calculated pivot by the U.S.
Yeah, a definite calculated pivot, a strategic recalibration.
And what about inside Pakistan? How did this play out there? Because, okay, it undeniably boosted the military's profile internationally.
No question about that.
But there's also the angle that it might have subtly undercut their own civilian government. I mean, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif wasn't there. That's pretty conspicuous.
That's a really crucial point. It absolutely elevated the Pakistani military's standing, not just on the world stage, but internally, too. It kind of reinforced the military's traditional role, as the main point person for Pakistan's foreign policy with key global powers, sometimes even seemingly above the elected civilian government.
So for Prime Minister Sharif, being absent from such a huge meeting with the U.S. president, That could look pretty bad.
It could certainly be seen as embarrassing, yeah. And it potentially highlights that perennial tension, the civil-military imbalance that's always bubbling under the surface in Pakistan. It sort of showed who really holds the reins when it comes to the big international relationships.
Okay, so it's clear this one lunch sent ripples everywhere. But to really get the significance, we probably need to look past the immediate headlines, right?
Yeah.
We need to understand the history behind this whole triangle.
Absolutely. You can't understand the present without digging into the past.
So where do we even begin with that history?
Well, you have to begin in 1947 with the partition of British India, the creation of two new independent nations, a secular India and an Islamic Pakistan.
An event that wasn't just about drawing lines on a map.
Not at all. It was cataclysmic, mass displacement, maybe up to 15 million people forced to move, huge violence, tragic numbers of casualties. It was traumatic.
And that split, especially the whole unresolved issue over Jammu and Kashmir, that basically set the stage for everything that followed.
Directly. It laid the foundation for the ongoing conflicts, the deep-seated rivalries, the mistrust. It all traces back to that moment, particularly Kashmir.
And then, almost right away, the Cold War starts looming large. How did that global superpower fight shape things between India and Pakistan in those early years?
Oh, it had a massive impact. Pakistan, looking for security, maybe a counterweight to India, which was geographically larger, it aligned itself pretty quickly with the U.S.-led Western Bloc, became a really key strategic partner for Washington.
Right, CEOs, CENTO, all that.
Exactly. While India, meanwhile, famously championed non-alignment, tried to forge its own path independent of both the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Which must have created a really complex web.
Totally. You had the U.S. giving significant military and economic aid to Pakistan, while India developed closer ties, particularly defensively, with the Soviet Union. It led to this geopolitical balancing act, often with Washington trying to, walk a tightrope between the two.
And this U.S. balancing act, it feels like it's been a constant theme throughout history, hasn't it? Moments where the U.S. clearly leans one way, then pivots back later.
Absolutely. It's a recurring pattern. You can see specific examples. Well, think about the 1971 Indo-Pakistani War, the one that led to Bangladesh's creation. The U.S., under Nixon and Kissinger, overtly tilted towards Pakistan. They even sent the Seventh Fleet into the Bay of Bengal.
The Enterprise incident.
Right. And many historians argue that move seriously damaged U.S. prestige and trust, especially in India, but maybe in both countries. Then you fast forward to, say, the 1999 Kargil War.
Oh.
The dynamic shifted completely. The U.S., under President Clinton this time, very publicly blamed Pakistan for crossing the line of control in Kashmir. And that stance, that pressure on Pakistan, actually ended up strengthening the growing U.S. ties with India.
So it really shows U.S. policy in the region has been more pragmatic, maybe driven by immediate interests, rather than some fixed ideological stance.
I think that's fair to say, shifting based on the geopolitical needs of the moment.
And through all these ups and downs, one thing seems constant. The huge role of Pakistan's military. It seems almost foundational to the country's identity and its foreign relations.
It's undeniable. The military has consistently been an incredibly powerful force within Pakistan's political landscape, often seen as the ultimate decider of power and policy behind the scenes.
And that got formal recognition too, didn't it, with the U.S. designation?
Yes, in 2002, Pakistan was designated a major non-NATO ally by the U.S. That status isn't just symbolic. It gives Pakistan preferential access to U.S. military gear, training. It fundamentally links its defense structure to U.S. strategic interests.
Even when there are political disagreements.
Even amidst political ups and downs and public friction, it really reinforces the military's institutional power and influence within Pakistan.
And yet, despite all this tangled history, these underlying tensions just keep erupting. We saw it dramatically in 2019, the Pulwama attack, the airstrikes that followed.
Yeah.
It's a real reminder this isn't just history in books. It's live. It's shaping daily realities, shaping the future of the whole region.
That's absolutely right. But, while history casts this long shadow, today's geopolitical chessboard has its own set of strategic imperatives, completely new pressures.
Well, so how have these old relationships adapted? Especially now, with new global players really making their presence felt.
That's the key question, isn't it?
Okay, let's start with the U.S.-Pakistan connection today. We know the history, the Cold War stuff. What defines it now, looking beyond that recent lunch meeting?
It's still really complex, a mix of cooperation and, frankly, friction. You still see military cooperation happening. Look at the recent agreement that $397 million F-16 sustainment deal.
Right, keeping the existing fleet going.
Exactly. It signals an ongoing commitment at some level to Pakistan's defense. But the strains are still there, big ones, particularly around long-standing U.S. worries about Pakistan's role in Afghanistan's instability and perceived links to certain militant groups.
So it's a relationship of necessity, maybe, but with deep distrust underneath.
I think that captures it well. Strategic necessity often seems to override the underlying distrust, but it's always there.
And flipping to the other side of the triangle, U.S.-India. That's often framed very differently, isn't it? As this rapidly strengthening partnership, a key part of Washington's whole Indo-Pacific strategy.
Oh, absolutely. That relationship is probably the most dynamic part of this triangle right now. It's strengthening across so many areas: defense, trade, technology, intelligence sharing.
And is it really seen primarily as a counterweight to China?
Largely, yes. Washington definitely views India as a crucial partner. It's a huge democracy, a major growing economy, and strategically vital in countering China's expanding influence across the Indo-Pacific.
But as we saw with the Trump-Munir lunch, these things are delicate.
Incredibly delicate. Any perceived major overture to Pakistan by the U.S., even if driven by other factors, has the potential to complicate that U.S.-India alignment, at least create awkward questions.
And meanwhile, right at the heart of it all, that India-Pakistan rivalry.
Yeah.
It still burns pretty hot, doesn't it? Still mostly fueled by Kashmir.
It's the fundamental fault line, still. The Kashmir dispute isn't just about land. It's packed with emotion, history, strategic value. It defines so much of their relationship.
And we keep seeing flare-ups. Some reports mention tensions escalating again in 2025, showing how fragile things remain.
Exactly. Even relatively minor incidents on the line of control can spiral quickly. It affects the whole region's stability and inevitably draws in outside powers. It's a constant worry for international diplomacy.
But maybe the biggest change, the thing really turning this old triangle into something more complicated, almost a four-way dynamic, is China.
China's not just emerging anymore. It has fundamentally altered the power dynamics in South Asia and beyond.
How so?
Well, look at the Belt and Road Initiative. This massive infrastructure and investment project stretches right across Asia. It offers an alternative path for development, one that directly challenges India's traditional influence in the neighborhood and deeply shapes Pakistan's economic future.
And China's relationship with Pakistan is famously close.
The all-weather friendship, as they call it, that close strategic alignment between Beijing and Islamabad creates a major strategic headache for New Delhi.
So China's rise forces everyone else to adjust.
Absolutely. It forces both India and the U.S. to constantly recalibrate their own economic plans, their strategic thinking. They have to engage differently or risk being sidelined. It's not just about U.S., India, Pakistan anymore. It's a complex four-player game now.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. The history, the shifting alliances, China's rise. What does that unexpected Trump-Munir meeting on June 18th, 2025, what does it really signal for the future of South Asia, do you think?
Well, potentially it signals a strategic adjustment, a situation where the U.S. might be trying to balance its very strong focus on India within the Indo-Pacific strategy against a renewed, maybe more direct engagement with Pakistan.
So not necessarily throwing India over, but tweaking the balance.
Exactly. Not a full pivot away from India, probably, but perhaps a more nuanced recalibration driven by immediate geopolitical needs, like maybe those concerns in the Middle East we talked about.
And what kind of pressure does that put on India? Because if Pakistan feels it can leverage renewed U.S. ties to sort of push back against India, New Delhi's going to have to react, right?
Precisely. Indian diplomacy will be under significant pressure. They'll need to maintain their strategic autonomy, make sure their own deepening partnership with the U.S. isn't somehow diluted or complicated by Washington talking more to Islamabad.
It forces them to weigh their options carefully.
Very carefully. Maybe look for new diplomatic channels or strengthen ties with other powers beyond the U.S.
And that other point, we touched on the enduring influence of the Pakistani military, which was so obvious with Munir getting that White House invitation. That remains a critical internal factor for Pakistan.
Absolutely. It raises that ongoing question about who truly holds the power levers inside Pakistan's complex civil-military dynamic.
Does the U.S. engaging directly like that inadvertently reinforce the military's position?
That's the debate, isn't it? It definitely sends a message both inside Pakistan and outside about the military's primary role. It raises the question of whether it makes the civilian government's job even harder, their position more precarious.
Looking ahead then, it opens up some really fascinating possibilities, or questions at least. Like, could the U.S. actually try to step up mediation efforts between India and Pakistan, even though India always says no to third parties?
It's possible the U.S. might test those waters again, especially if things get tense. But India's firm stance against mediation is a huge, probably insurmountable hurdle. They've just never budged on that.
Okay, and the other big question, China. As China's influence grows, especially in Pakistan, could that actually push the U.S. closer to Pakistan, maybe to counter Beijing?
That's a real possibility, a strategic conundrum for Washington.
And what would that do to the U.S.-India relationship, which is built partly on countering China?
It would put immense strain on it. How do you balance needing Pakistan to counter China's regional influence, while simultaneously building a strategic partnership with India, which sees both Pakistan and China as major rivals? It's incredibly tricky.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of this is just history repeating itself, maybe with slightly different players or motivations?
There's definitely an element of that. The patterns, the core rivalries, they persist.
But ultimately, stability in the region isn't just about grand strategy and military alliances, is it? It also has to involve managing these complex relationships in other ways.
Like what?
Well, I sometimes think about things like cultural diplomacy
Hmm,
or even sports diplomacy. Think about cricket. It's massive in all three countries.
true. India-Pakistan matches are huge events.
Exactly. It offers this unique, shared passion. An avenue, maybe, for fostering some understanding, some connection, even when political relations are terrible. It shows there are other threads binding these places together, beyond the geopolitics.
That's a really important point. It's a powerful reminder that while the big game of nations plays out, there are always those human connections, those cultural bridges. And maybe, just maybe, they can help temper some of the purely strategic calculations.
So let's try and recap our deep dive today.
Mhm.
What we've seen is that this U.S., India, Pakistan triangle, it's incredibly complex. It's constantly shifting.
Yeah, it's deeply rooted in this shared, often really difficult history, but it's also perpetually being recalibrated by today's strategic needs and now fundamentally reshaped by new global players, especially China.
Which leaves us and you with a final thought to maybe chew on. In this incredibly high-stakes game, where every move can really shift the entire board, is it actually possible for these historical rivalries to ever truly give way to something stable, something cooperative in South Asia?
Or are we just destined for this perpetual cycle, this
Yeah.
endless loop of strategic maneuvering, shifting alliances, temporary thaws, and then renewed tensions? What do you think the next unexpected move on this chessboard will be?